Hey guys, we are back. Another episode of Real Estate Stories. And today we have a lot of stories. Special guest today, good friend, longtime appraiser, Mr. Brian Gaffney.
Thank
Welcome,
you, Bob.
brother.
Appreciate you
So,
having me on.
oh, absolutely. I'm really excited to make this video for you guys today and have Brian here. Just to give you a sense, Brian has been a full-time real estate appraiser in this area for over 20 years. And we've known each other for just about as long, like literally. And I invited Brian on here because he's going to share some great stuff about the industry that we just don't know. But before we get into that, let's take a few minutes, Brian, and talk about you, brother.
I love to talk about myself, Bob.
So we met over 20 years ago. We were sitting down and trying to figure that out a little while ago, right? So over 20 years ago, we met each other. And of course, for many, many years, you've had your own appraisal company, Gaffney Appraisals, or Gaffney Appraisal Services. But like, how did that happen? Like, where were you before that? What prompted you to become an appraiser? And like, how did you end up with your own company?
Yeah, so I was working like most people in South Jersey at PHH Mortgage in the appraisal department. So I was ordering appraisals, following up on them, checking the status, that kind of stuff. Got talking to some appraisers, and I thought to myself, this could be something that I could do. So I went to school. I got my apprentice license. I actually started as an appraiser on September 10th of 2001. So that Monday I started as an appraiser, and then the following day, Tuesday, September 11th happened.
Wow.
So yeah, that was, a lot of people, you say, when did you start? And they'll say, 2000, 2001, but I know the exact date, because of that. So I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I got hired by a commercial appraiser. And I worked for him for about 2 months.
As an apprentice?
As an apprentice, yes.
Okay.
And I didn't like the commercial. The commercial was, you do a project, it takes 2-3 weeks to finish the appraisal. I liked the faster pace. So I moved I left him and went to work for a company out of Haddon Heights. Good old Frank McCann. Worked for him for about 5 years. Left him, went on to be a staff appraiser for Wells Fargo for 7 years. And in that time frame, I started my business in 2005. So I was working for Wells Fargo, and then I was doing my side business, or doing my own company on the side.
Okay, so you're going to have to teach me here. So let's go back. That was a lot of information. So for a short period of time, you were a commercial appraiser. That didn't fit. Your personality, because the time it takes to complete a project. Real estate appraisals take a couple hours, start to finish, ish, right? Mm-hmm. And you can do volume, so it's a different type of approach. What does it mean to be an apprentice? How do you become an apprentice in the appraisal industry?
Yeah, so to be an apprentice, you have to complete 75 classroom hours, which you can take online or in person. I wound up taking mine in person at Rutgers University. Once you finish those classes, then you apply for your apprentice license. And at that time, when you get your apprentice license, then you have to keep a log of every appraisal you do. So then you have to accumulate 1,500 hours of work hours. So that roughly translates to about 1.5 years. Full time. So you're working for somebody. I got paid during my apprenticeship, but there's a lot of appraisers who don't. So it's tough to get into. A lot of appraisers don't want to take on apprentices because they don't feel as though, well, I shouldn't say that. A lot of appraisers train apprentices, and then the apprentices leave, and then they try to take their business. So that's a big thing within the industry that a lot of people don't talk about.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. I think I've seen similar things in a different kind of package happen on real estate teams too, right? So there's
Right.
teams, small teams, big teams. And I think that sometimes you see reluctance on certain teams to teach too much to the team member for fear that the team member is going to walk off with a piece of the business at some point. Kind of similar in that way. But I didn't know that. That's fascinating. So it's basically a year and a half apprenticeship if it's full time. And in a lot of the cases, as an apprentice, you may not get paid. Is that
Right.
what you said?
Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
I think that the most appraisers feel as though their time in training them is their pay. So
Wow. So, but you found a paid position in those early years, so
right,
you were able to put food on the table, right?
I was,
Uh,
yes.
and and then it didn't take you too long to go out on your own. It was just a few years, right?
Now I was with Frank McCann for about 5 years.
Yeah.
Got my apprentice license, and then I got my real license. And then I just, the natural progression is to go out on your own. You don't want to work for somebody the rest of your life. So most of the people that had worked for him had left and started on their own. So it's kind of a win-win for both parties because, he's making money off of me for 5 years. I'm making a little bit of money. And then, I moved on.
So help me understand, Brian, because this is just fascinating. Because I know a little bit about your business, like you know a little bit about mine, but I don't know the intimate details of the structure. So it's my understanding that the way it exists today, that if a mortgage company, when the point in a real estate transaction comes that they order the appraisal, the mortgage company has a relationship with appraisal management companies. Is that right?
Yeah. So that went into effect probably about 7 to 10 years ago. Originally, as an appraiser, when I first started, I would go to mortgage companies. I'd introduce myself. I'm Brian. I'm from South
Right.
Jersey. I grew up here. I have pretty fast turnaround time. And then the AMs, what was happening, and a lot of the loan officers were calling, and they were kind of like dangling the carrot in front of you, Bob. They're like, well, if you can get me 400 on this deal, I'll send you another deal. So that was happening a lot. And the government had realized that we were, as appraisers, getting pressured into coming in on value.
Mhm.
Back then it was, you get an order and it said purchase price is 400. If the purchase price can't be met, please give me a call. So those things happened back then. Now there's this, the AMCs, they're the middle person. So there's no real interaction with the loan officers like there used to be.
So you get your orders through a middleman, basically? Is that how it works now?
Yeah. So AMCs, some lenders have their own in-house. Like one of my bigger clients, Annie Mac, they have their own appraisal department.
Okay.
So they order through their own appraisal department. I think the rule is it, it has to be a separate entity. Like you can't just speak to the loan officers. There's got to be that middle person that's going to be, right down the middle and not persuade you into coming in at certain values or, not calling for certain repairs, stuff like that.
So this is really fascinating, right? But here's the question. So when you go out to do an appraisal, you know the contract price of the property, correct?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So I know I've heard people in the industry argue, well, you shouldn't because it's supposed to be totally non-biased. But we also know that homes are basically like used cars. You can't put an exact like there's always going to be a range, right? So
Right.
if you go if you have an a contract that the house is 500,000 and you find comparable homes that are 475 to 525, you're probably going to land at your five.
Right.
But if all the homes are 4 to 450 based on your industry parameters, there's no way you're going to hit five, right?
Right. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so wow, it's just interesting. Have you ever heard people talk about the fact that maybe you should, as an appraiser, shouldn't even know what the contract price is? Like,
Yeah. And that's a valid point. But there's certain situations where, the purchase price is $500,000. If you come in at 495, you're gonna get some heat. But if you would have known ahead of time, then hey, maybe the value was there at that purchase price.
Yeah. All right, cool. So let's take a time out on this part of our conversation and let's share some of the soft, fun, more fun stuff with whoever's watching this video. All right, so the history of the two of us, it probably goes back to that flip property we were chatting about, right? That's how we officially met. So way back 20 plus years ago, guys, just by coincidence, we would kind of bump into each other at a local gym, right? You kind of during the day, right? We kind of took gym time like in the middle of the day, like lunchtime, right?
Yeah.
And we just kind of, we're acquaintances, just, same crowd, same people. And we would get to talking in the sauna, as we would say, right? The sauna stories. And so back when I was in corporate America, and you were probably still working for McCann at that time.
I was, yes.
I was also in real estate part-time back then, and I was flipping homes. And I remember vividly, I was trying to purchase a property, and I remember vividly, I got a phone call from the mortgage company, and they said, there's an issue with the appraisal. It wasn't the value. It had something to do with the condition. And I said, well, it was a totally as-is sale. I was going to be renovating it. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? And the person from the mortgage company said, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I'm like, well, can I call the appraiser and ask the appraiser for clarification? And that was before they changed those rules, I guess.
Yeah.
And they gave me, I'm on the phone and I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm writing down the name, Brian Gaffney, phone number. And I hang up the phone and I go, wonder if that's the same Brian from the gym. And I remember, I swear, dude, I remember like it was yesterday calling you up. And I guess it was your cell phone back then. I don't even remember, right?
Yeah.
Could have been your office line. I don't even know. And I call up and I'm like, hey, it's Bob from the gym. Remember me? And you did, it clicked. And I said, well, you appraise a property, and I know you don't want to get phone calls like that. They start off that way, right? Like any appraiser. Oh, you appraised the property for me. But that's never been our relationship, and it's certainly not my style. But I'm like, but I need a clarification on what was wrong with it. And you took the time to, whatever the issue was, and neither one of us could remember. We were talking about it before this. And I remember whatever it was, we resolved it, and we closed 10 days later, right?
Yeah.
It's a small freaking world, dude.
I just remember Ava
Avenue, yeah. Yep. And then it was shortly after that I got into this industry full time, and wasn't too long after that either that you ended up starting your business. I remember that. And as these parallel lives were just kind of, running their course, interestingly, both of our wives, separate times, separate decisions, became nurses, right?
Yeah.
You pointed that out to me. I'm like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Both of our wives have been nurses for a long time, but those decisions were totally independent of each other. And it just kind of happened,
Yeah. We both have boys as well.
We both have boys. It's just one of those kind of weird things, right?
Right.
There's not too many people that, and I'm not going to speak for you, but I'll speak for me. There's not too many people that I would say, hey, this is a friend of mine, and I know in a pinch I could always just reach out. You're one of those guys to me, dude. Totally.
I appreciate that, Bob.
Yeah. It's just I feel like I know you so well from knowing you for so long, and just different elements of who you are as a human being, Yeah, I knew your dad. I know your mom. I just feel like I've been around you so long that I know that you're a good one,
Thank you. Yeah, I think we kind of clicked because we both have personalities, which, is kind of hard to find these days.
All right. So let's share another story. Here we go. Sure. We told you, everybody, this is going to be fun, right? So tell us this Camden Trenton Avenue. Tell us the Trenton Avenue and Camden story.
Yeah. So I was doing an appraisal in Trenton or Trenton Avenue, Camden,
Yeah, Camden.
and it was foreclosure, I think. And no, it was an estate sale. An estate sale.
Right. Yeah, it was a state.
And I said to the seller, I said, if this doesn't go through, I would be interested in buying it. And the seller surprisingly called me about a week later. So the seller says to me, listen, I also have the house next door for sale. Would you be interested in buying that? And I had said, this is my first deal. I was like, even though it's $27,000, I got to bring somebody in that can kind of help me out here. So I brought Bob in. So I bought the one house. Bob bought the house next door. We closed, right? I think what happened is somebody from my office had gotten the appraisal on your property, and the property had unfortunately a dead cat in it that was actually frozen to the carpet.
Yeah, fortunately, it was like the middle of winter when all this was going on, right?
Yeah.
And upstairs, I remember that too. It was just a shame, but at least it wasn't like summer,
Yeah.
because these homes were vacant and they were vacant for a while.
Yeah. So I remember pretty vividly that the appraiser at that time made it subject to the removal of the cat.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
of course, the cat needed to be removed, but the cat was stuck to the floor. So the seller at the time cut the floor out, and there was no longer the cat.
Yeah, it was. And that's actually when I learned about, I know this sounds crazy, but like you talk about getting rid of odors in homes. And I deal with that now. Sometimes a home just has odors, right? And we're getting it ready for sale, helping a client. Odo ban. That's when I learned about Odo ban, which now they sell at Lowe's and Home Depot. But back then, I don't think they did. I can't remember where I got it. But really good air freshener that doesn't leave any kind of perfumey smell behind,
Mm-hmm.
But I remember getting a gallon or two of that and just neutralizing everything in that house. I know you got the cleaner of the two houses for sure. That I remember. But I appreciate you bringing me in on that transaction and opportunity because it worked out well for both of us.
Yeah, I resold it, made a pretty good profit. I know you had kept it as a rental. It was a couple blocks from Cooper Hospital. I'm assuming those properties are probably worth $250,000 now.
Listen, Mr. Appraiser, that's the magic of real estate, right?
Yeah.
Like just if you hold it long enough, in most cases, it's just going to continue to appreciate.
Yeah.
Yeah, most cases. So, look, if you would have kept that now, right? Could that property that you owned or I owned have been, could they be 250, 300 right now? Yeah, maybe, but it worked out fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So, talk to me, Brian, about how you're set up. I know that you are basically a one appraiser show, right? Mm-hmm. Like how many appraisals can you physically do in a week? I know you have administrative help. And is there an advantage or disadvantage to the way you're set up versus others that may have 10 staff appraisers working for them? And why, you're pretty comfortable the way you are. I know that. I don't think you're looking to make any major changes. So like, why is this the best way for you to be structured versus maybe having 10 different appraisers on your team?
So I've had apprentices before, Bob. They never kind of worked out because this is my business and nobody really cares about your business as much as you do. Mm-hmm. Plus it's Gaffney Appraisals. So people are calling the office for me. It's not Speedy Appraisal or Target Appraisal, those things. So I'm in control of every appraisal. Every appraisal I do days where I'm on the road, and then the next day I type all the reports, usually about 3. I'll do 3 in a day, and then the next day I'll type them. That'll consume 6, 7, 8 hours depending on the complexity. I came from an appraisal company that had 7, 8 apprentices, and the owner just kind of like signed off on the reports. And as things progressed, I always kind of felt like since I'm in charge of the workflow and I'm in charge of the business, I can't fire myself. So it was really basically on me to figure it out myself and not have to worry about what other people are doing, so to speak.
Do you think in the 20 something years you've been in this, that obviously, I guess some of the software and technology in some ways has made it easier from a system standpoint for you, I would imagine, right? But do you think your industry has gotten easier, harder? Can you do more appraisals in a week now than you could have done 10 years ago? Like, how does like the impact of technology, like how did that change what you do and how you do it?
Yeah, interestingly enough, you can basically go to a property with an iPad and start filling out your forms. I still use a tape measure. So a lot of people are coming to me and saying, why don't you use a laser? And listen, I was trained on a tape measure. Nothing's more accurate than that. Um, the technology has definitely gotten better. Um, what has happened over the last few years is all the appraisals that are sent through Fannie Mae, all the information is being recorded. So there is so much data um, that is out there now that has been supplied by appraisers, essentially maybe putting us out of business in 5, 10, 15 years. However, since day one, I was told that there wasn't going to be appraisers for very long. So here it is 22 years later, and they still haven't. Ultimately, a computer can't determine the condition of a property. And as you know, as a realtor, condition's big. Um, a computer can determine the location, but unless somebody goes into the property, you don't really know what's going on inside.
That's a really, really valid point, right? So, I mean, the tape measure part's funny. I mean, I use a laser measurer when I'm measuring rooms for the MLS, but my measurements don't necessarily have to be as accurate as yours. So I get it. Do you have one of those wheels also?
No.
Okay, because some of these guys have a wheel, right, to walk the property lines.
Yep.
So, do you think, like, when you talk about the potential of technology taking over the industry, I guess part of that is the concept of a desktop appraisal, which I hear about once in a while from lenders,
Yeah.
right? And then to your point, like the valuation. So there's the Zillow's estimate, right? There's others. Redfin has theirs, and Realtor.com has theirs, and HomeSnap has it. Like, there's just a ton of them. I'll give you my opinion on those, and then I'd love to hear yours. So my opinion is, I look at, in preparation for a listing appointment, I will review several of those, not because I think that they're accurate out of the gate, but I will look at them because I want to see, of those, let's say top 3 or 4, are those numbers similar or vastly different from each other?
Mhm.
So if it's, one says 300, one says 320, one says 285, I'm going to say, interesting, they're reasonably close. But if one says 300, one says 417, and another says 187, I'm like, wow, they're so far off. But I look at them because I know that the consumers are looking at them, right? People buying or selling homes are looking at these. And to your point, 1,000%, man, the condition will swing everything. And nobody from Zillow or Redfin or similar are going into any of these houses the way you are or I am, right?
Yeah.
Or any real estate agent or appraiser. So, what do you think the impact of those things are? And I mean, you eyeball them occasionally, I guess. Do you think that they're accurate? Like, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, we do. I go to properties, and the first thing I walk in, they say, "Hey, Zillow said my house is worth $400,000," and I say, "All right, well, Zillow is an average of all the
Yeah.
properties in the neighborhood, similar square footage. The condition plays a huge role. Um, there, as I can tell you that I don't look at Zillow or those too often, but I've noticed over the years they seem to be more accurate. So I
Mhm.
don't know if they're receiving the data from appraisers or um, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, but they seem to be much more accurate than they used to be.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say 5 years ago, they weren't as accurate as they are now. And they tend to be, in my opinion, more accurate in like a cohesive neighborhood, like townhomes or condos. They'll tend to be more accurate than in a neighborhood of random single-family detached homes,
Yeah.
right? Because the flavors and styles of those homes in that neighborhood can vary wildly, So, and I think the older the home, the more off they can be too. And it depends on sales velocity for their
Of course. Yeah.
comps, right? Yeah, if
Yeah.
there's not a lot of sales velocity, I think they can be way off. If it's more rural, they can totally be way off, right? Where the homes are really spread out, like deep South Jersey for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was out 2 weeks ago. I went to a property down in Sicklerville. It had 7 acres. There's not 7 acres. Nobody has 7 acres in Sicklerville. So the guy says to me, he says, do you know what the house is worth? And I'm like, listen, you're not in a development. Like, I have no clue. And as I'm walking out, he goes, yeah, you do. And I said to myself, listen, I wish I did, but I don't. So.
Well, not on the spot, right? Like he was trying to press you right there on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, when we go out, we have an idea, obviously.
Yeah.
If it's, like you said, a condo, a townhouse, a lot of developments, we know what the 2 bedrooms are going for, what the 3 bedrooms are going for, in what they call tract homes, But when you're in 7 acres in Sicklerville, there's no way
Yeah, that's a rare property. Very
Yeah.
rare. Yeah. So speaking of that, so like, what's your opinion? I know that real estate agents handle this very differently. I know some real estate agents that say every time an appraisal is scheduled for one of my listings, I'm there to meet the appraiser. And then I know other real estate agents that say, I'm not interested. And just spoiler alert, I'm one of those in the second half of that. Whereas I feel like when an appraisal is scheduled for a listing that I'm involved in, or even a purchase, when they make the appointment, all I do is say, hey, Brian, you're all set for Thursday at 1:00 or whatever it is. If you get stuck or you need anything, I'm here to help. And I let you as an appraiser do your job. That's always been my way, but I know a lot of agents that are not that way. So I'd love to hear from you as a seasoned appraiser. How do you feel about that? Like when you show up at a property, if you have to meet someone there or they just happen to be there and show up, and what are those conversations like?
I welcome them, Bob. I mean, a lot of realtors have information or, certain things that they can provide that will make my job easier. I can tell you, after the pandemic, it's been pretty slim. I'm not seeing realtors as much, but prior I was. I can tell you that there's 2 realtors that I've been working.
No names.
No names.
No names. But 2 realtors. What? Go ahead.
2 really well-known realtors meet me at every property, and I'm talking. I've met these 2 gentlemen over 100 times, and it's to the point where I'm like, listen, you know me, you don't have to come anymore. And they say, no, I come every time. So.
Do you think that them or others showing up when you're going out to do your job, do you think it really sways anything, or like really, do you think they're giving you information that you wouldn't have already known or found on your own? Like, because their goal is, I really want to make sure it appraises, right? That's the real estate agent's like, hey, our contract's 425. I know there's really not a comp higher than 411, but I really need to, but are they, is there information that they're giving you that you can think and go, oh, okay, I'm glad they shared that with me?
More than likely I have all the information, but it's those 1 or 2 little things that could make or break the deal. And, I've done some seminars before with realtors, and that question comes up a lot. And there's nothing that says you can't be there. So, if it's a type deal or you want to go, I encourage it. I know that a lot of appraisers don't want to talk to you and have this standoffish kind of, tone. But, if you're going to make my job easier, why wouldn't I take any information that you had?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, I would have to say, though, that I can tell from the tone of some appraisers when I speak to them and they're scheduling the appointments that they don't want to hear anything from anybody. But that's just their inherent personality, right?
Right.
And that's why my approach has always been, I'll keep it simple. Hey, I'm here to help. anything you need, but I don't want to get in their way. But I guess it really just depends on the human. And then we've been fortunate a few times over the years, or maybe a couple times a year, probably, I would say, somehow our transactions get linked and I see your name come across, or you just let me know, hey, heads up. And of course, I'm not worried about it. You're going to do your best. But I also know, because we've had a couple, I think, over the years where it's just a challenge to hit the number, you know?
Yeah, so basically an appraisal is an opinion of value. So you
Yeah.
got that side of it. And then you also have what is a house worth? A house is worth what somebody's paying for it, right? So, we have to find the data to justify what the property is worth. And sometimes it's just not out there, which is difficult for us to maintain and you as well.
Yeah. So, Brian, tell me about, I kind of go think about the Ava Avenue property. I know that another thing that comes up a lot with clients and with real estate agents is what the kind of things you're looking for. We understand comps, I think. I think most understand comps and the historical and how far you can go. I know sometimes they'll try to stretch that historically. So tell me if this makes sense. From that standpoint, ideally you want to be less than 6 months of history.
Correct. Yes.
Within the same neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And a similar home, and you bracketed, I think is the term that you guys use, right?
Yeah.
So, if it's a 2,000 square foot home, it's probably not fair to compare it to a 3,000 square foot. But a 2,200, you can adjust for, right? A 1-car garage versus a 2-car garage, you have mathematical adjustments that you use for that kind of stuff. So that's arithmetic to a degree, right? But then there's stuff like people will say, oh no, a VA or an FHA, that they're going to need all kinds of repairs. What's going to happen? And actually, the transaction that we met through was conventional financing 20-something years ago, which could also have potentially a condition issue. So can you take a moment and clarify FHA, VA kind of repairs that you're looking for as an appraiser, as well as what could show up in a conventional appraisal that you may call out, which is certainly less common than the other two, right?
Yeah, mostly FHA and VA are similar. They're really looking for safety issues. Handrails are big. Another real big one is chip paint on homes built before 1978 because of the lead. So those are the things that we're kind of looking for. So as you know, FHA is backed. So the loan is backed through FHA. So they want to make sure that, if they have to take this home over, that there's no repairs. And the same with VA. So ultimately, we're more so, looking to see if there's any real issues that would require immediate attention as far as safety goes.
So you'll also, I think, tell me, maybe I'm wrong. If you're there in the winter, you want to make sure the heat comes on.
Correct. Yeah, we have to check that.
But to clarify, you're not going to inspect the flame pattern of the heater to make sure that it's working properly. You just want to make sure it comes on when I adjust the thermostat, right?
Yeah, I think the term that we're supposed to use is observe. We're supposed to observe that it works, the dishwasher, the heater. Obviously, we're not checking the AC in the winter. So observing everything and just making sure that things are functional. If you were to do a conventional loan, the utilities don't have to be turned on. However, if it's an FHA loan, they do, because we would have to test the water and the heat, the air, and the plumbing, make sure there's no leaks. So that's one of the bigger things between FHA and conventional.
Interesting. So what happens if you walk into a house and you see a stain on the ceiling that looks like it could be from water? In those different types, FHA, VA, conventional, what does that mean to you, and what do you do about that?
Yeah, so we have to note whatever we see. So conventional wise, I would note it. FHA, at that point, I would go into the attic to see if there's been leaks, previous leaks, or if it now has a new roof, if it's significant. this is where this is part of the industry that is tough for us. Like, we're not home inspectors. I'm not a roof certificate. I can't provide a roof certification. I can't provide a plumbing certification. So if there's a gray area, then we'll call for certification, because we can't tell exactly what's going on. You take a picture of it, you've observed it. I went in the attic, I didn't see any other leaks, but I don't know where that's coming from. So that's when we would make the appraisal subject to a roof certification.
It's great nuance there. It's not a nuance, really. It's the fact that you're not a home inspector, you're an appraiser. And interestingly, I've had lots of clients, and for some reason this comes up more with clients using VA loans. They may say to me, oh, well, I don't need to do a home inspection. The mortgage company is sending a VA inspector out. Yeah. And that's the term they use. And what I try to do is I'll then try to educate that client and say, hey, man, I get it, but I just need you to understand something. The VA inspector, and tell me if I'm making a mistake here, is an appraiser with a VA certification looking for some certain things. But in general, you may spend 30 minutes in a house. Is that a fair give or take?
Yeah.
Is that a fair number? Whereas a home inspector may spend 3 hours in the house.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a whole different thing that they're looking for. Right.
Yeah, I've noticed, and you probably know for sure, the FHA contracts say get a home inspection, right?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Good point.
I don't think that they have them in conventional or VA, but a lot of times if I'll see repairs that maybe aren't called for, or I'll ask, did you get a home inspection? Has there been a home inspection? Mm-hmm. Just to cover the buyer's sake, because some of these homes, you got young kids coming in who really don't know how to swing a hammer anymore. So just to protect them, I'll occasionally ask if the home inspection's been done.
Yeah. How are you handling the change in the market that we've been experiencing since COVID? Meaning it seems like, it's slowing down, but it seems like for the last 3 years, like literally almost month on month or quarter on quarter, we keep seeing values rise. Not as rapidly as it was even a year ago, but as an appraiser, like if you're in a neighborhood where in the last 6 months, you've seen the home sell between $400,000 and $450,000, and now there's a transaction for $475,000. How do you account for that when you're looking at data?
That's a good question. Most appraisers are making time adjustments for the sale. So if you have a sale, you're using a comparable that sold 4 months ago, and the property values are increasing at 10%. So we have to make that adjustment for those 3 months. And what FHA wants, and most other people, is that you're not making adjustments from the sales price. You're actually making it from the contract date, which is a month or two before. So if a property sells, in March, but went under contract in January, I need to make a time adjustment from when it went under contract, not the date it was sold.
Oh, very interesting, because so if I understood what you said, so in that example, there's a chance, based on what we've been seeing, that between the time it went under contract and the time they actually settled, it could have gone up a little bit more.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And those calculations is that just something that you do based on like the last 6 months or 12 months worth of data to see a trend in that neighborhood?
Yeah, we look at what houses have sold for 12 months ago versus what they've sold for similar houses. And you can see, it went up 10%, 5%, 3%. And, we have to account for that.
But at some point, though, sometimes there's got to be a challenge, right? Like, especially in the last few years, like certain neighborhoods, because somebody kind of has to be the first if it's a sleepy little neighborhood, right? And if it's not a cash buyer, because the cash buyers, they don't worry about appraisals, right? But somebody has to be the first. And at some point, that's the appraisal order that's falling on your desk. And you got to go, I don't know how I can justify this extra 50 grand or whatever it is. Like,
Yeah.
have you seen that? Like,
It's like being the first in a new construction development, that's brutal. But yeah, I mean, at that point, we look at similar competing neighborhoods, see what those are selling for. And like you said, there's always going to be a high. There's always going to be the highest in the development. If it's the best house and it's the most recent, we have to look outside into similar neighborhoods, similar, parameters, homes that would compete with the subject but aren't in that development.
yeah, challenging stuff, man. Did we catch everything that we wanted to catch on this list?
We sure did. I mean, I've seen a lot. I've done some famous people's homes. I've been in some houses. I was in a house. I was brought in to do private deals. I do a lot of private deals. I think we had talked about the divorce, right?
So divorce is right. So that's interesting. You were telling me that you've seen more appraisals for divorces in your career in the last few years than before, right?
Yeah. Substantially more after COVID. And those are very interesting, as you know, Bob. You have one person buying somebody else out. So the person buying the other one out is like, this isn't working. There's this, there's, the repairs, this. And the other person's like, oh, yeah, we got brand new kitchen. So you got two people following you around the house telling you two different things. So those are always kind of unique.
Yeah, I get caught in those too in a different way. So sometimes they just want to sell the house. And sometimes, fortunately, people are getting along nicely. And other times, unfortunately, they're not. And I always tell them up front, look, I will design a communication system for you that works best for both of you. So if you need me to speak to you and speak to you, or if you want to make sure all communication is simultaneous, whatever makes sense, because it's a big life change what these people are going through, no matter what the scenario is. And, it has to be handled delicately, and it's funny, like the stuff we do, like these stories, it's not like on TV,
No,
right? Like,
no.
it's so different what we do, like all this stuff. And one day I'm going to make a real TV show instead of these YouTube videos, right? And talk about the real stuff that, like, I had 3 calls last week within a few days. They were all divorce situations.
Yeah.
You just, and I call them change in relationship. That's kind of how I package it in my head. Change in relationship, no problem. And then I go into that mode and just try to help people get through that process, whatever that means for them. Yeah. Gotcha. Well, Brian, if anybody watching this wants to get in touch with you, and I'll put it in the notes down below, but if anyone wants to get in touch with Gaffney Appraisal Services, who do they call? Where do they go?
Yeah, well, my email's pretty easy. It's Brian at Gaffney Appraisals, BRIAN. Our office number here is 856-481-4628. I do have a full-time secretary, so when I'm on the road, you'll be able to speak with her. Those are the best ways to contact me. And I appreciate it so much, Bob. It's always great talking to you.
Yeah, man, we have to catch up again real soon.
Yeah.
With no video camera rolling.
Yeah, I know. Those are when we can really talk.
Well, once again, everyone, thank you for joining us for another episode of Real Estate Stories, and a big, big thank you to my friend and professional, Mr. Brian Gaffney.
Thanks, Bob.
All right.
I appreciate your time.
All right. More content coming your way soon, guys. We'll see you.